Mr. Speaker.
Phil Twyford in reply.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry that the members of the National Party in this House are not supporting this bill, which is a common sense and rational response to a failed housing market. How do we know it's failed? Because we have the lowest home ownership rates in 64 years. It now takes 50 years on average to pay off the average Auckland house. And we know it's failing because we have an epidemic of families living in cars and garages and campgrounds. And that overheated and failed housing market is made worse by an influx of uncontrolled foreign investment that is driving house prices higher and higher. Sir, there are many other countries, particularly around the Pacific Rim, that have enacted measures that are similar to my bill, to Labor's bill, to try and control the destabilising effect of uncontrolled foreign investment in the housing market. It's the policy of the Australian Federal Government to ban non-resident foreign buyers from buying existing properties. If people want to invest in real estate, they're not a resident, they're not a citizen, they have to build a new house and thereby add to supply. That policy has channeled $30 billion of foreign investment into the construction of new homes in Australia in the last 12 months. I want to refer the House to recent statements by the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, who had this to say about Vancouver. Now, Vancouver's a very nice city, as anyone who's been there will attest, but it bears many similarities to the Auckland housing market. It is incredibly expensive. Justin Trudeau said recently, an influx of capital from Asia is partly responsible for soaring house prices in Vancouver. We know, he said, that there is an awful lot of capital that left Asia in the past few years. Obviously, overseas money coming in is playing a role in the Vancouver housing market. He's just launched an investigation into the impact of foreign buyers in the Vancouver and Toronto housing markets. Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, they all have restrictions like my bill or stamp duties that are designed to restrict the destabilising effect of uncontrolled foreign investment in the housing market. In Beijing and Shanghai, non-resident buyers cannot purchase residential real estate in those cities. Why? Because the Chinese government is committed to protecting the economic interests of the people who live in those cities. Sir, the government has cynically downplayed the impact and the role of foreign buyers in the housing market here. For years, they refused to collect the data on the impact of the presence of foreign buyers in the housing market. In spite of the fact that in both Australia and the United Kingdom, it's the policy of governments in those two countries to have a searchable and transparent register of foreign property ownership. From October the 1st last year, the government required non-resident foreign buyers to register with Inland Revenue. And recently, Land Information New Zealand released the data they'd collected over that 6-month period. The government cynically tried to say that it showed that only 3% of the transactions during that 6-month period went to foreign buyers. But they had excluded 45% of the transactions from the data set that they used to calculate that 3%. So the data showed nothing of the sort. It was meaningless. It made no useful contribution to the public debate about the impact of foreign buyers in the housing market. Even more damaging for the national government's credibility on this issue was that the 4 Australian banks have now stopped lending to foreign buyers. They have stopped lending to foreign buyers. Who do you believe? The national government, when it says foreign buyers have no impact in the housing market, or the 4 Australian banks who completely dominate lending for mortgages in this country? That, sir, in a single stroke, demolished what little credibility the government had left on this issue. The National Party wants to make this an issue of race. They are telling the 64% of New Zealanders who want to see Labor's policy enacted, National is telling those people, and the 54% of their own voters who want to see Labor's policy enacted, they are telling those New Zealanders to say that they want a government to put the interests of young Kiwi home buyers first, that they are xenophobic. That, Mr. Speaker, is the definition of being out of touch. They are utterly out of touch. They stand on the side of foreign, non-resident speculators against the interests of young Kiwi first home buyers.
Time for this debate has expired. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those that have that opinion will say